friends, what is up? Welcome back. As you can tell, today I wanted to kill two birds with one stone. Every day that I film, or every day that I attempt to do this every time I film, I try to make myself slightly more presentable. And today I thought I would just combine that into one video instead. I wanted to film a Get Ready With Me and talk to you guys about the books that I read last week. And the reason why I wanted to do it in a less formal format is because I have some thoughts and opinions and a few things that I talked about in my vlog. I'll list it up here for you guys that I kind of wanted to dive a little bit deeper into, because I feel like there is a larger discussion to be had. And I am not really running short on time today, but I just wanted to kind of speed things along a little bit. So I thought I would combine getting ready and having just like a chat with you about what I read this week, what I attempted to read this past week, and put it all together into one video. Like I said, in a bit of a more informal format. Now, before we get started, the first thing that I'm going to do, and I'm actually going to do that off camera, is put my base makeup and my eyebrows on, because that always takes a long time, and I'm not actually sure that I have enough to talk to you guys about for that long of a time to do. So I will be back when that is done, and we will talk about what I read this week and some things that I have to say about the YA community and the YA like publishing community. And yeah, so I will be right back. Getting into the discussion portion of this will be a little bit later in the video, but I do, like I said, have some thoughts. The first thing that I read, if you guys watched the vlog, was a comic book that I was sent from DC. I'll throw a picture here on the screen for you guys. It is called Shadow of Batgirl. It is written by Sarah Kuhn. This is a retelling, I would say, of Batgirl. It's like an alternate universe. This is something that DC has been doing for a while. They've been doing alternate versions of some of like the classic superheroes, and I actually really liked this. I'm not somebody who reads a whole lot of DC, so the reason why when they reached out to me and asked me if they could send me some, new releases, was because I wanted to kind of get into the world. And like I said, I've never read anything, so I don't know much about Batgirl. I have a coworker who is a huge Batgirl fan who also read this after me while we were at work, and he really enjoyed it as well. The part of it that really appeals to me is the Batgirl in this story is Asian, and I'm not sure if she is originally, but I know the author kind of wanted to write it in a way where she saw herself a little bit more, because she originally sort of saw herself in Batgirl when she was growing up. So maybe she was originally Asian, I'm not sure. But I really appreciated that. Overall, I think outside of the diversity and being inclusive, the story itself was actually really cool. So basically this girl is, the girl who becomes Batgirl, obviously, is the daughter of a very prominent supervillain, basically, and she kind of gets cast out because she is trying to murder this man, and he says, "Tell my daughter that I love her," while she's trying to do it. And so she stops doing it because daughter appeals to her, because obviously she is a daughter, and that word holds weight for her, even though our main character doesn't really read, write, or speak. So she ends up staying at the library and learning all these new things, like how to speak, how to interact with people, how to write, how to read, those kinds of things. And she does sort of develop a friendship. Now, I don't want to give too much away in case people do want to read this. I think that it is fun, and I think that it is something people would really enjoy. Now, obviously, I've only read the first one, so I don't really know how it's going to go, but overall I am impressed. I have been impressed with all of the new releases from DC that they've come out with, like these retelling like graphic novels. I do really enjoy it so far. So I would be interested to pick up the next one. The other thing that I read would be Middlegame, and this is kind of ties into a little bit of the discussion that I wanted to have. Now, Middlegame, I believe, is actually an adult book, which ties into what I wanted to talk about with the YA community, especially on Twitter and Instagram and the like. Now, this isn't to bash anybody. This This isn't to bash the genre. This isn't to bash anything like that. So for me, this is an adult book, and everyone I know that has read it has given it 5 stars and has really truly enjoyed it. And I feel like a lot of those people are people who are often coming from the YA genre and are reading this as like an adult book. But I have to be honest, I gave it 3 stars, and it is because I felt like, and I talked to Bunny and AJ, the 2 people that I was reading this book with, and we all sort of agreed that it kind of felt like Shonen took on more, like bit off more than she can chew, like had a larger idea than I think that she could properly execute. Now, things that I liked about this book. I liked the writing style. I actually am shocked that I liked the writing style because I feel like for me, these kind of whimsical sort of books aren't my favorite. That writing style doesn't really appeal to me. And I'm shocked that I liked it because something that I didn't like about the story is it was all over the place. So when we first started reading the book, we were sort of confused on what chapters we were supposed to be on because the chapters are flashbacks or they are jumping to different parts of the story, different alternate like realities, basically different timelines. And that was really confusing. And it was like, you know, eventually you get a grasp on it. So I don't want to say it's like, oh, I'm like too dumb to understand the story, and don't fucking say that to me because that's not what this is. I have read stuff that isn't way harder to understand than this. If I can get through The Gunslinger by Stephen King, I can get through this book and understand it. The problem with the book, however, for me, outside of the story being sort of interesting, like I wanted to see where it was going to go, and I thought the characters were really cool, I thought this was one of those books where the author had too many ideas and too many like fingers in different pots. Like I feel like there were so many things left unanswered by the end of the book that it was really unenjoyable to me. And my thought is that people who are coming from YA, and like I said, this isn't like a slight, I feel like liked this book because they were okay with like the unanswered stuff, and they were okay with, I don't know, I feel like maybe standards are slightly less. This is going to be controversial. I understand I probably sound like a dickhead, but that's what it is. That's what I feel like is happening. Like, and I'm not saying you're wrong for liking this book because people like books for different reasons, but if you look at it critically, it really severely lacked. And like even for me, like even though it did lack in those ways, I still ended up giving it 3 stars because I thought that the characters were phenomenal and I did like the writing style and I thought the overall story was interesting. But there's so many things left unanswered, things that I can't even talk about because it would give away so much of the story for you guys. If you've read this, you probably know what I'm talking about. There is more to do with characters in this book than the actual story itself. So there is like an overarching theme of the characters are trying to figure out who they are and get to this secret place. They never get to the secret place. There is a villain who's not really a villain in this story who lends absolutely nothing to the story. He basically just walks around and is like, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and never fucking does it. Doesn't make any sense. The like henchmen, I think, are far more appealing to me in this story than the actual villain himself, and that was really sad. There's more than I want to say, but I can't really say about him. But also there's like, for me, many things to do, like this book when you first start reading it has a lot to do with alchemy and alchemists. Now, the problem with that was, and AJ addressed this and really made me think about it, one of the things that bugged me is it was more about the alchemists themselves and the characters, which didn't really lend much to the story because a lot of the time I specifically think was wasted on the characters as opposed to beefing up the story and making the story like making you want to keep reading. So if you go into this book and you don't like the characters, you're not going to want to keep reading the book because at that point you're like, what the fuck is the point? I'm not getting the actual story and I don't like these characters. And a lot of what kept us reading was the characters. Like we truly, truly, truly love them. And that's not enough. Like reading books like this, for me these days, this is why I said it's not a slight to anybody else, because a lot of people can read a book that maybe, and I used to be like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you love the characters so much, so you're like, fuck it, I don't even care. Shadow and Bone, like that whole, the Grisha trilogy, that's how I feel about it. Like a lot of the story was sort of meh, but I love the characters so much that I was like, fuck it, I love this series. So I get it, but for me, I think my tastes are changing, and I need a little bit more from the stories that I'm reading. And like I said, that's not to say like that people who did enjoy this or enjoy books like this or, you know, enjoy books that I don't like are less than me or are stupid or whatever. I don't want people putting words in my mouth. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying what I require from the books I'm reading is a lot more than I think it used to be. And I think that a lot of the time for me these days, that's just not YA. It's not the genre that I want to read anymore. Because another thing that I have noticed is I feel like a lot of YA stories or a lot of YA books are being pushed right now or have been being pushed without enough time to really sit on the story that they are trying to tell. I feel like I have really good examples of that. The best one that I can think of is King of Scars. I also hated Six of Crows, but that's neither here nor there. King of Scars was absolute garbage. I hated that book. And as somebody who loves Nikolai and loves the characters and really was so excited for that book, that was like one of my top releases of last year, I felt so let down by it because I feel like it was so incredibly rushed. And it's because the characters weren't really true to who they are. Like, Nikolai was completely different, and I think it was one of those things. And really, as an author, there's not much you can do about this when you have deadlines, when you sign, contracts to have books published by certain dates, and when publishers are wanting to push, because really the bottom line is money. Not really speaking to your audience or telling that story that you're trying to tell. I think recently that's what I really felt, is that it's like making money, and not necessarily on the author's point of view, but from the publisher point of view. And so the authors are under a lot of pressure to get all these books out to keep up with constant releases. And I feel like, for me, it's just left such a foul like taste in my mouth, like a lackluster taste in my mouth, because you can tell and you can see it. You can see the laziness in stories, and you can see how rushed things are, and you can see when series get stretched out when they don't need to be. And that really sucks for me. And it's left me feeling really unsatisfied and really disappointed with the genre as a whole recently. And the reason why I felt the need to kind of sit down and talk about this is, like I said, not because I think anyone is right and anyone is wrong, but because my thoughts on this have been mirrored by a lot of people. I have one friend in particular that I can think of. Her name is Jess. I will leave her Instagram down below. But her and I have been having this conversation kind of off and on here and there over the last year, because she's sort of distanced herself, from the genre as a whole. And I kind of didn't understand that at first. I was like, different strokes for different folks, whatever. But the more I think about it and the more I pay attention, the more I'm starting to see it. And like I said, a lot of that is just personal preference and what you want to read and what you really want to get out of what you're reading. And so, like I said, her and I have been having this conversation, and I think the one book that really made me realize it, and this has been going on for about a year, was, like I said, King of Scars. Like, it really was like the exclamation point on how I'd been feeling, because it was so easy to be like, this is what I'm thinking of, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I've been experiencing that I haven't really been enjoying. So that's really sad for me. If like, I've read a couple YA books last year. Most of them were new releases from new authors or were standalones that I really enjoyed, that I think a lot of thought and time and effort went into. But if you know of any YA books that you really enjoyed, that you thought were done well, that were, like, brilliant in what you would expect, like, leave them down below. But I just recently feel like the YA genre isn't really for me, which also ties back to YA Twitter and YA, like, Bookstagram. I've noticed more so recently and I'm not saying like everybody who reads YA is like this, but where, like, I can't ignore what I'm seeing, if that makes sense. Like, this is where I'm seeing it. I'm seeing a lot more on YA Twitter and YA Bookstagram, and just people being kind of close-minded in a way. Like, they're finding things to really fight about. They're finding things, like, I see friends turn on each other pretty much fucking constantly on YA Twitter. Like, one day somebody would be like, oh, this person is my best friend and I absolutely love them. And then the next day it's like, fuck that bitch. And it's such a confusing, like, thought to me. Like, that people could so quickly be like, this person is my friend and I love them. And then the next day be like, you know what, fuck them. All over a book. And that is such a confusing thing to me. And it kind of makes me realize that sometimes, obviously this happens, but relationships are a bit more shallow for other people than they truly are. And that's why when you become friends with somebody, it's you have to kind of learn exactly how much you want to give to someone, because you never really know online, you know what I mean? And I think that the other thing that I've realized recently is, in watching Read with Cindy hit 100,000 subscribers, she put out a video that was talking about some drama that she had got caught up in on book Twitter, Bookstagram, pretty much everywhere, because there's drama everywhere in this community. And she posted a status that was of a man who said the most welcoming, nice community was the book community. And a lot of us were like, hey, no. And people were getting mad about that. Like, people were saying, like, I curate my feed, and which I get, which I do, believe me. I curate my feed so I don't see anybody else's bullshit. Like, anyone who posts something problematic, I unfollow them. Anybody who posts something very drama-inducing, I just mute them, especially if they're like a friend that I occasionally do enjoy talking to, but unfortunately their feed is a lot of drama. But when Cindy posted her video, she was talking about a lot of YA books that people loved that she decided to try to read. And people are like, well, if you know you're not going to like them, why are you reading them? Which I get the sentiment, but art is to be consumed. You know what I mean? Like, she's not doing it for views. And a lot of the time, I think what people latch onto is they see their favorite book and she's talking about it and she doesn't like it. That hurts everyone's feelings. I fucking hate when that happens. I always want somebody to like what I like because that means that there's another friend to talk about. But on YA Twitter, it becomes this big drama thing where people are fucking subtweeting each other and yelling at each other and, like I said, turning on friends. Because here's the thing. When it comes to bigger booktubers, people tend to put them on a pedestal, but when those people upset them for whatever reason, they're just gone. Like, they don't want to interact with them and they hate them. But what people aren't also realizing is there are a lot of books, like a lot of YA books that Cindy has read that she has genuinely enjoyed, but people aren't paying attention to that. They're only paying attention to the ones that she doesn't like, which is a little bit realistic? No, ridiculous. You can't expect somebody to like every single book that they read, but people always want to hold on to the bad parts of it. And that really fucking sucks. Because they're missing out on these discussions with people, and they're missing out on, you know, somebody that they maybe have decided isn't worth their time because they don't like the same stuff that they do, and they're missing out on the fact that they are liking some of their favorites. And it's just, it feels very black and white to me, and it feels like there isn't a whole lot of discussions happening. And I say a whole lot because there are a few. There are people who are having these discussions. There are people who are willing to listen and hear, like, you know, differing opinions. But I feel like a lot of the time it's just like, oh, you don't like my favorite book? Then I don't want anything to do with you. And I see it all the time. So don't try to be like, oh, that doesn't happen, because I'm speaking from personal fucking experience here. I'm so tired of the fact that people have to defend the books that they like. And I'm so tired of people having to defend the books that they don't like. And that really baffles me. Like, for example, Stephen King shows his ass all the time when it comes to the fact that he doesn't know how to write any kind of diversity into his books. So I'm talking like gay, I'm talking anybody who isn't fucking like 40-year-old male white character, or is like the prodigy 8-year-old white fucking character. Like, Stephen doesn't know how to write that. And he tries. He really tries, but he fails. And he fails because he doesn't actually care about diversity. That's what people don't recognize. And today when I got on Twitter, I saw it and people were like talking about it. And I'm like, bitch, we've been talking about it. I have been talking about this for years and years, and it's why I don't like his new stuff, because it feels like forced diversity. He really honestly doesn't care in like his day-to-day life, and people are just now getting clued into that, and I don't fucking understand why, but it's like a big deal. But I continue to read Stephen because I love what he writes. I truly, truly love his books, except for his new stuff. His new stuff is absolutely fucking garbage. But the problem is that we spend so much time defending how we feel about something and defending our, you know, taste, whether we like or don't like something. And that's unfair to us as readers, because we are here to consume it. We are here to enjoy or not enjoy it. And yes, like, if you are somebody who is a trusted reviewer, you want to make sure that the books that aren't problematic or speak to somebody are getting into the right hands. So there's a little bit of pressure. And that sucks, because like, when I used to read just to read for enjoyment, it was a lot easier then, because it was like, oh, well, I just don't like this book. And I didn't really need to explain to somebody why I did or didn't like something. I just did or didn't. And I could put it down. And I didn't really have anybody to talk to about it. And now there's basically a whole new fucking world for me where I can talk to people about it. I have to pay more attention. And I feel like that brings on a lot of, like I said, the need to defend yourself and feel like, you know, this is why I like it or this is why I didn't like it. And that really fucking sucks for me. That is basically what I wanted to cover in this video. There is another book that I read this week which sort of spurred on exactly how I'm feeling about it, and that would be The Great Alone. This is a book that I've been wanting to read for a really, really long time. And this book follows our main character, Lenny, and her mom's a little bit of a hippie, and her dad is a prisoner of war from Vietnam. And the reason why that is kind of integral is when her dad gets back from Vietnam, her mom, while he's away, basically tries to get into a bunch of religions and find like a community, because she's a very young mother. And so she tries to find people who love her, because her parents sort of cast her out because she you know, had a baby really young, and her parents are from like a wealthy part of Seattle. So when Lenny's dad gets back, he is having, naturally, nightmares and PTSD from the war, as you fucking would, because that was traumatic as hell. Like, the war itself was super traumatic, but the fact that he was a POW was, you know, it makes everything even more difficult. So he's having a lot of nightmares, he's having trouble holding down a job. When the father of one of his battle buddies from the war sends him a letter one day and says, there is land up here in Alaska for you if you and your family would like to take it. So they decide to, you know, close up shop, move to Alaska. And Alaska, where they move to a village, I think it's a fucking outpost. There's literally like 30 or 40 people that live there. There's no running water, there's no electricity, nothing like that. And they get there right before the winter. So they're kind of like battening down the hatch with everybody in the community. The reason why I fucking loved this book is because it was so true to how Alaska really is. And when I was reading reviews and people were like, this is brutal for the sake of being brutal, because her dad goes fucking insane in the book. And people are like, this is just brutal for the sake of being brutal. And I'm like, no bitch, this is exactly how it is. This is like, oh my God. As somebody who lived through a lot of what you read in that book, I was so taken aback that an author could truly, truly write like exactly what it's like. Like, the winters are very brutal. They make people go fucking crazy. At one point in the book, they were talking about how it's sunlight for 16 hours a day. And that's really how it was where I lived. And then she was talking about how it was also basically only light for 6 hours a day, and that's also how it was where I lived in the wintertime. And it does make you go crazy, and the suicide rate is incredibly high, and drug addictions are incredibly high because you're trying to do anything to feel better, whether that be just removing yourself from the situation completely and killing yourself, or getting, you know, drinking constantly like her dad did, or doing drugs like all my friends back home still do. You know what I mean? Like, it's true, and people go crazy and they start hitting their wives and they start beating their children. And the dad in the story obviously goes a little bit more crazy than I think the average person would get in Alaska, but it is still very true to how it is. And I think because he is a POW and a vet, that makes it feel even more like plausible. Now, the ending of the book was a little bit weird for people. I actually really liked the ending of the book. People said it was more of a Hallmark ending, and I don't really believe that it was. I think there was still like side effects of the rest of the story that were kind of mirrored in that, and I really enjoyed it. I thought that I don't know, like, I felt like it was realistic to what would happen. I don't want to say, because obviously I want people to fucking read it. You should read it. Go get the book and read it. If you are really sensitive to like to domestic violence and stuff, you probably won't want to read it, but I think it was very true to like life and just how things happen. And I feel like it's a book that a lot of people would enjoy. Now, reading it, I didn't realize how many people absolutely fucking loved it. So many people were like, this was my favorite book of the year. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I was worried when you were reading it, like Jess was saying, I was worried when you were reading it that you wouldn't like it. 5-star, probably my favorite book that I'm gonna read this year. I thought the ending was beautiful. I thought everything in the middle was beautiful. I thought the overall story, the characters, the writing style, oh my God, the way that she describes Alaska is so true. It was just all fucking wonderful. And it brought me back to that feeling of, why am I reading YA? Because every time I read a YA book, I sit there and I go, okay, so I really liked this book, but there were a couple of things that I didn't enjoy about it. You know, maybe the characters kind of bugged me, and I like sit there and I'm like, what do I really want to rate this? And I struggle with that. But with this book, it was like 5 stars. I fucking loved it. And this is why. And I had like tangible things. And often as a reviewer, I sit here and I'm like, well, do I even know like how to review? Like, I feel like a lot of the times I feel like I'm an inadequate reviewer, and that I don't really know how to review things, and I don't really know how to write reviews, or how I really, I guess, feel about a book. And I think that's because I've been reading such mediocre shit recently. And it's like I'm trying to convince myself that I like them, and I'm trying to convince myself that they're good and that they're worth reading and that other people would like them. And that's a horrible fucking feeling, because it feels dishonest. Because you get caught up in the hype, and you get caught up in the fact that everybody fucking loves this book, and you're supposed to love this book, and if you don't love it, how are you going to defend the fact that you don't? Like, what are your true problems with it? And I think overall it's just because, like, I may enjoy a book, but I'm left kind of wanting every single time. I'm wanting more than what I'm actually getting. And it does make it really hard to review things. But I don't know if anybody else feels like I feel. I don't know, for me, I just want a little bit more from the things that I'm reading. I want a little bit more depth. I want a little bit more meat on it. And like I said, there are always going to be gems. And I feel like a lot of the problem is that we have like teen and then YA and then it goes straight into adult. And people have been arguing for a new adult genre for a long time. And I feel like a lot of the books that maybe people, or like me specifically, have enjoyed over the last year that are technically in the YA genre could probably actually be in a new adult genre. And that is why I think that we do need it, and why I have been vocal about the fact that there should be another genre in between YA and adult, because there is a bit of a discrepancy with, like, you're not there, like the time in between high school and when you're like an adult having babies, getting married, like all that shit. I think that there needs to be another genre in between there about finding yourself and like the time in between that, when you're not quite a kid but not quite, you know, what you would think of when you think of an adult. And I don't know. That's just how I've been feeling recently. And I feel really shitty saying it because there's no good way to critique something, I think, these days. Especially for me, I tend to try not to critique things because it invites into my life a lot of, I don't want to say negative feedback because I'm fine with negative feedback, but it invites a lot of hostility, and I don't respond well to hostility because, one, I'm a Slytherin, and when you piss me off because you're being ignorant, I'm gonna get really upset about it. But also just because I feel like, for me, it's like, I don't, like, unless something is problematic or hurting other people, if I feel a certain way about something, I don't care about other people's opinions. And that's why those comments where people try to convince me, like, oh, you didn't like this book? Well, I really like this book and this is why. Which is fine. But when the people are like, but you're wrong for not liking this book, it's like, no, and I don't care that you feel that way. And I don't know if it's just because I'm older and that's just how I feel, but I don't know, that kind of stuff has been really getting to me recently. And like I said, I've read some great stuff over the last week. I was trying to read The Guinevere Deception and I couldn't finish it. I don't know if I'm going to DNF it or I'm just going to finish it. The problem is if I finish it now, it's going to be like a 2-star read. And the other issue is that I was really liking it when I first started reading it, but then I started reading other adult stuff at the same time, like just general adult fiction. I was reading, or am still reading, Things I Never Told You, and I was like, man, the writing style is really different. The writing style is really lush. I'm really liking the story. And then going back to to Guinevere Deception, it felt kind of hollow and empty for me. So maybe that is what happened. I don't know. But leave me recs down below for standout YA books that you've read, or even standout new adult books. And leave me recs down below for adult books that you really like. Like, I'm not cutting out the genre completely because there's always going to be books that I want to read. No matter what, like, I don't discriminate. I defend till the day I die that YA is a valid genre and I do enjoy it. I just think that maybe right now I'm in a season where I'm not really enjoying it, and I'm not looking at anybody else like they're wrong for feeling that way, you know, for liking that kind of stuff. But let me know down below if any of this resonates with you. I need to get my hair done for the other video that I'm filming, which is my top books of 2019. So you guys will see that on Friday. But I did just want to sit down and talk to you guys because that's what we're a community. You know what I mean? Like, this is what we do. This is what we talk about. And I just had some thoughts and I didn't really know where to put them, and I don't like just putting things out on the internet when I can't really explain myself. Once again, I'm not shitting on the genre. I'm not shitting on people who like it. I'm not saying you're wrong for liking it. I'm not saying I'm right and I'm better than you, and I fucking hate that I have to put disclaimers, and I told myself 2020 was going to be the year that I stopped doing that, but I always feel like I need to, because for some reason, I'm not saying like I'm a mean person, and I'm not saying that like I'm not compassionate, but my compassion and like my niceness only goes to a point. And I think for some reason, when I talk about things negatively online, people think that I'm being fake, or they think that that's not who I am and I'm just like grumpy and I don't really mean what I say. And that's not true. And I got pegged as that person, and that I'm just like this nice person. And while I am, I'm also very honest and open. That's like my policy, be honest and be kind, but always, always be honest. And so when I have a differing opinion that maybe I used to have, people don't really trust it. So whatever. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love you a lot. I'm sorry if you're also feeling like this, because it's been a very, very frustrating, like, I don't know, like, it's been a very frustrating last year, but it's been a very, very frustrating start to 2020. It's been hard to like want to sit down and like read and talk about stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love you a lot, and I'll see you in Friday's video for my top books of 2019, which has YA adult. It has everything in it. Like, I'm going to talk about the gems that I found and all the books that I truly love from that year, but I will see you guys in that video.